Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Higher Moment Mastermind. I am Shira Lotzar, happy to be your host this morning, joined by my colleague, Vern Schellinger. Vern is a former HR executive and a career coach. I myself am a recruiter and a career coach. We normally have another colleague, Alki Thompson, who hopefully will be joining us as well. He's a recruiter. So the three of us are here, or today the two of us are here to answer your job search questions. Whatever job search question you have, hopefully we'll be able to chime in and help you out. We're really just here to help. So for the next hour, that's what we're going to be doing. So we'll just popcorn around the room. Whoever has a question, whatever the topic, from resumes, interviews, working with recruiters, salary, networking, why did nobody ever respond back to my application? All of it. Vern?
Well, the other thing I would say is, since you are all new, prior to asking, as you ask your question, just tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in accounting. I'm in, human
Just a
resources,
one-liner. Yeah. So we just have a
one-liner, so we
sense.
get some idea of, what your background is, because that kind of helps us also maybe give you a more specific answer to your question.
Yeah. And specifically also what you're looking for, right? It's because I know
Right.
some people are career changers, so your background might not be relevant to where you're going. So especially, the kind of job or even sector that you're going into. So, all right. So with that, who wants to kick us off?
Don't be shy. We're here to help.
Yep.
I'll start. This is my second morning. My name is Enid May Jones, and I am an association professional. I've worked mostly in the education, learning, and professional development area. I'm wanting to stay in that area, but more towards chief learning officer job. But the more I apply, I'm learning that titles don't really align across across the industry. So it depends on the size of the association, but more of a executive C-suite level, higher level area in learning and development.
Anyway, so do you have a question this morning we can support you with?
Well, yesterday I did a LinkedIn webinar that actually was really good. It was about interviewing, and for the first time, I never heard this way of interviewing. Instead of using the STAR method of interviewing, this gentleman was recommending answer the question, detail example, and describe the relevance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the way he did it. Mm-hmm. It was a little different from STAR, and I liked it because it was shorter. Mm-hmm. And the last part about describing the relevance brought it back to you. Mm-hmm. So that was interesting, and I just wanted to know if anybody else have heard or worked with this.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that particular one, although there are definitely a lot of different formulas that people use. Mm-hmm. They'll use STAR, situation, task, action, result that you mentioned, SAR, situation, action, result, PAR, problem, action, result. Yeah, there's the one that I tend to use, which I think is a little bit akin to what you just mentioned, Enid May. It's called CAB, challenge, action, benefit. So why I like that particular one, I guess there's lots of ways to do these, but anyway, this particular one I like because what it does is it starts with the challenge the organization was facing, mm-hmm. the actions you took, and the benefit to the organization. Because at the end of the day, that's why the employer is even asking you the question, how can you help us? So mm-hmm. what they'll do sometimes is they'll say, how have you helped somebody else in the past? Which will show us maybe how you're going to help us in the future. And mm-hmm. so challenge, action, benefit. So when you think about the challenge too, it could be the challenge the organization was facing, or maybe in your case, maybe the challenge the membership was facing, or maybe if you're from corporate world, the challenge the consumer was facing, the challenge that somebody was facing that came to you, you had to use some superpowers. And then how did that constituent benefit from the work that you did? Mm-hmm. So anyway, but yeah, thank you for bringing that up. There are all kinds of interesting ways to answer the question.
Yeah, I've used situation, obstacles, actions, results. Here was the situation, here was the problem, here was the challenge, fill in the blank, whichever one you want to use.
Right.
That the purpose, the interviewer is trying to get you to talk to them about, here's how you behaved, here's how you acted, here's how you solved the problem, to vet, wow, this person has the skills, experience that we're looking for.
Yeah.
Now that's just one question out of, a lot of questions in the interview, but that's the whole purpose of that.
If it's okay, since you brought that topic up, I'd love to just sort of springboard off of that to maybe some related topics around answering interview questions. Okay, so it's not just the formula that you use, it's the content of your response. And one of the things that I'd like to emphasize here, and we use this concept all the time on this call, and that is that employers are risk averse. Now, why am I saying that in this context? Employers are trying to minimize the risk of their hire. If anyone on this call has ever hired anybody, you know what I'm talking about, okay? And so in trying to minimize their risk, what they will often do is think to themselves, okay, does this person have relevant experience? Relevant, not just experience, not just superpowers, not just accomplishments, relevant accomplishments. Have they been there, done that, have a couple t-shirts? Okay. What often happens, and I want to say this so slowly and clearly because I have been recruiting for a long time, a really long time. And I've been a coach for a long time. And I've interviewed lots of people, I've coached lots of people in interviewing, and I will tell you, here is a theme across the board. Often, when a candidate is interviewing and the employer asks them a question that asks about their accomplishment stories, or even that very generic question, give me a greatest accomplishment, anything like that. What often happens is that the candidate, very well-meaning, okay, will start to launch into some sort of story. But guess what? The story has nothing to do with the job. It's just a great accomplishment story, but it's not directly aligned. So what happens is the employer gets frustrated. Okay, now again, this is just miscommunication, and that's why we're on this call, is to help people bridge the gap. So what'll happen is the employer's thinking themselves, they didn't answer the question, number one. So therefore they have to start probing and figuring out. But number two, they're not getting from you your relevant experience. So they know they can't align what you've done to what you're going to do. And then thirdly, here's the worst part of it, is that it could actually cause brand confusion. And I'm going to give you a very clear example of that. Many years ago, I was doing an executive assistant search, okay? And the employer was asking the candidate, so give me a greatest accomplishment. And what did that candidate say? They said, well, let me tell you about this big, huge, conference that I planned. Okay, wonderful. Great story. Not only did it have nothing to do with the job, it made the employer think that the candidate wanted to be a meeting planner. Brand confusion. I did that. I'm a career coach. I write resumes and LinkedIn profiles. I had the same kind of situation with a client once. Funny enough, it was a very similar situation. This job seeker, she's a government relations leader. She does coalition building, that's all her stuff. And when I was asking her about her accomplishment stories for the resume, funny, she actually gave a very similar example. She was talking about this 50th anniversary gala that she planned for a major nonprofit. And I said to her, Barbara, you realize that if we put that in your resume, people are going to want to think you're going to be a meeting planner, right? Okay, that kind of thing. And I'm encouraging you guys to think through the accomplishment stories. In fact, I had it happen yesterday. I was interviewing somebody, or the other day, a vice president of government affairs. And I was asking for, relevant, and this guy just gave me an answer. I mean, it was a really strong accomplishment, but it caused me some confusion. Like, he's telling me this story. Is he telling me the story because that's actually the work he wants to do? Or in this case, it actually wasn't relevant. Okay. So I say that because, and I'm making such a big point about this because it happens so often. You guys interview hopefully very infrequently. We recruit very frequently. We hear lots and lots of people do this. Hopefully you are all not professional job seekers. That would be great. Don't be a professional job seeker, right? Right. And yet it is extremely important that you go through that job description. Try to understand where that organization is coming from. What kind of problems are they trying to solve? What kind of responsibilities are they asking for? What kind of skill sets are they asking you to bring to the table? Do research on the organization, do research on the industry, do research on their mission, just do as much research as you can. Look for the highlights of what is important to them and do your very, very best to only bring up accomplishment stories that meet the mark as much as possible. Now, if you have, nobody's perfect, right? You're not going to check, probably not check every single box. If there are some boxes that you don't check, maybe there's some skill sets that you just don't have or don't have a lot of. Be aware of that. Be able to address that because it's going to be in the back of their mind. Again, going back to this person I just interviewed, this government relations search, there are certain kind of issue areas that this lobbyist is going to need to do. They're going to need to know about energy and the environment and sustainability and also trade issues. Well, this person has a lot of trade experience, but had no energy, environment. Well, we had to talk about that, okay? Because that's actually important to my client, but he doesn't happen to have it. So what do you do about that, right? So the way he responded, which was very interesting, he said, well, you know what? Legit, he didn't try to like fake it. He said, no, you're absolutely right. I don't have that, but I'm going to be that out of the box candidate. I'm going to be that person that gives a fresh perspective. Okay, it's an interesting way to respond, but he at least understood that going into the interview. And that's what I want to encourage all of you to do. Know the job description, understand what they're looking for. Where do you have superpowers? Where do you have some deficiencies? How can you overcome that, right? And even if you've had some experience, you just haven't had a lot, you can talk about that too and bring up some stories where maybe you've overcome a big learning curve. You know, most jobs you probably went into, you didn't know everything walking in the door, but you learned and you grew and you put your head down and you figured it out. Maybe bring up some of those stories to show the employer that you're actually someone who can learn very quickly. So that's kind of a high level, but I wanted to talk about it because it was just such an important, it's so relevant, right, to these interviews. Vern, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and to understand the other side of the equation as Shira is saying, the employer is risk averse. So I was an HR executive for a good part of my career, recruited lots of people, and think about it from the employer's perspective. They put the posting out there, they screen people on the phone, they bring people in for interviews, they narrow it down to the final two candidates, they make the hire, and the person doesn't work out. Then they got to start the whole process all over again. Very frustrating, very time consuming for the organization. So that's just the other side of it. That's why they're so focused. And to Shira's point, the more on point you can be to exactly what the needs of the job are, it gives the employer, the recruiter, some confidence. Wow, we're making a great hire here.
And it minimizes the learning curve, right?
Yeah. I would say the other thing that we should add here in the interviewing process, because we talk about this a lot, is the interviewing process is a two-way conversation. In other words, you need to be prepared to ask questions. You can ask the recruiter, the hiring manager questions in the interview. Really important. Don't sit there and just answer questions, especially if you get a question you don't quite understand. Could you elaborate on that? What's the importance to the role of this, to the skills, to this job? Ask them questions. That's just such an important thing.
Yeah, and ask, thank you. Let's jump off of that too, right? So ask clarifying questions. And sometimes you might get a stumper. You might get something like, sorry. So actually, by doing that, by asking the questions, that two good things happen. When you ask a clarifying question, well, A, it gives you more clarity, but also buys you some time.
A little bit of time, yeah.
Your response, and just, you don't have to just pop out with an answer. You can say, well, that's a really good question, Miss Employer. So are you looking for this kind of response or that kind of response? Or can you give me a little more background around that question as to why you're asking that? Because I want to be able to speak to your needs, which then actually opens the door for the employer to actually maybe give you a little bit more color. Oftentimes that doesn't happen in an interview. Often in an interview, an employer has some straight standard questions. And there's another analogy I like to use. It's the difference between playing racquetball and tennis. Most interviews are racquetball. They cue, you A. You're the ball. You're the wall. Boom, boom, boom. Cue, A, right? It really should be tennis. They cue, you A, you cue, they A, and you're having a conversation. And sometimes they cue, and before you A, you ask them some more cues to make sure you're giving them a good A. Okay. And so that helps to really open things up. And because most employers don't know how to interview. Even recruiters a lot of times fake it. Okay. So there's no sort of standard way to do this, but they were like, well, we're supposed to ask some questions. You're supposed to give us some answers. And the candidate sits with their hands in their lap, like a good person, right? Like a good little boy or girl. Right? And the reality is that it should be a thoughtful conversation. You need to interview them too. Okay. So first, yes, you need to ask clarifying questions, but to Vern's point, you need to ask good questions yourself. And those questions are things that, I mean, gosh, pick it. It could be in any possible category, from the scope of the role, the outcomes that they're looking for. You know, what would success look like in a year from now or 2 years from now? How can I know that I'm being successful? What kind of competencies do I really need to exhibit? What are the outcomes you're looking for in this organization? How can I help advance the strategic mission? How can I help advance the departmental goals? Right? That hiring manager, they've got their own goals that you're going to be helping them to support. Right? So you're going to help them to level up as well. What are some of the challenges that I can expect? When I first get into this role in the first 3-6 months, what are some of the projects that I'm going to be working on? Right? Tell me the resources that I'm going to have. Is there a learning curve? Like all of these things. Tell me about the external stakeholders I'm going to be dealing with. I mean, to see what I mean, there are lots and lots and lots of questions you could be asking about how you're functioning internally as well as externally. How can you succeed? Basically, how can you set yourself up for success is the bottom line question to help move the organization forward, because that's actually why you're being hired, right? So be thoughtful about the questions. And in addition to that, what are the things that you need yourself? Talk about work-life balance, talk about a culture. You can absolutely ask an organization, no matter who you're talking to, the HR person, hiring manager, CEO, describe your corporate culture here. Well, listen for how they respond. It's not what people say, it's how they say it, right? So, for example, if they feel like they've got this fantastic culture, they're going to be effusive. They're going to lean into that Zoom call. They're be like, yeah, man, oh my gosh, we are just like the best place to work, and we have family friendly and blah, blah, blah. We balance work and all this stuff. And they're just going to be, and you're going to see it on their face and listen to their enthusiasm. If not, this is what's going to happen. They're going to clear their throat. They're going to go quiet, and they're going to measure their words, and they're going to use aspirational language. And they're going to say things like, well, we're building our culture here, right? We are really growing toward a real team oriented. We are aspiring toward now that of course is code, right? For what's actually going on. Now, here's the thing. That should not necessarily make you run away from the job. Maybe you're a real team builder and you want that kind of challenge, and you are happy to go in and really help fix things. Great. That would be wonderful. Maybe you're the kind of person that thrives in adversity or thrives under pressure, or maybe the organization's falling apart and you are a fixer-upper kind of person. Fine. Great. They would love that. But you have to know eyes wide open. Don't have what we call a halo effect, right? A halo effect over the role. That happens a lot, especially, and I'm sorry I'm throwing all this stuff at you at once. Coming out of me. Especially if you have if you are aligned with the mission. I cannot tell you how many candidates will come to me, job seekers, my coaching clients, whomever, will say to me, oh, but Shira, I love this mission. Oh. And they get all teary-eyed about the mission of the organization, whatever that is, or they're aligned with the industry or whatever. And they have a halo effect around the company and around the job because they see the mission, the whatever. Guess what? At the end of the day, it's a JOB. It's a job. People are going to mess up. You're going to mess up. Everybody's going to have problems. It's just life, right? It's going to be a job. Now, it might be a wonderful mission, and you'll be happy on the and in the big picture, you're going to be happy to. But you're going to have challenges there. I promise you will have challenges. And if you didn't, it wouldn't be called work. Okay. So you want to go in with a realistic mindset, not just because you're aligned with the mission, or not just because you heard good things about a person there or whatever it is. Don't just have a halo effect, have a realistic lens, no rose-colored glasses, real glasses. Okay. and ask real questions about what is going on and say to yourself, okay, is this an organization I can align with? Is this a role that seems realistic? Is this a culture that I can fit into? And if there are holes that you're finding, because remember, people are putting on their best foot, just like you are, everybody's putting on their game face. But if you can peel back a little bit or listen between the lines as to what they're actually really saying when they're saying it or not saying it, then you can make a more thoughtful decision around, oh, okay, looks like they're a bit of a mess over there. Do I want to step into that? Am I that kind of person that really is up for that challenge of fixing a broken culture, broken systems, broken whatever, or not? Don't really need that, right? But you have to make an informed decision. Make an informed decision, take off the halo and put on your realistic glasses. Okay, so I've just fire hosed at you. I'm hoping that's
Yeah, I'm going to say one more thing, and then we got to let these fine folks ask us more questions. So as an example of a question to ask, and one that I particularly like, if you were interviewing me, I would ask you, um, Maureen, if you were to hire me and 6 months from now, you said I was really doing just a fantastic job, what would make you say that?
great question.
You know, but and hopefully in the answer they'd be telling you, well, you'd have to you would have used these skills to bring this program on. They'll give you hopefully some specific information that then if you have experience or you have a story or you have something that you can then repeat right back to them and say, well, that's great, because in my previous job, this is, I did almost exactly the same thing at ABC Corporation. And you could tell them, a quick, here was the problem, here was the solution. So I'm excited to learn more about this job.
Great question.
Yeah.
It pulls out what's really important to them.
Yeah. I guess the other thing I would say, the interviewing, and we're spending so much time on it because the job search process is a gauntlet that you go through. It's frustrating. It takes lots of time, takes lots of effort. You do all of this stuff, all to get to the point of the interview, because you don't get the job without the interview. So the interview is kind of the culmination of all the hard work you put into the job search process. And you really want to nail the interview, because you got to have the interview before you can get hired.
That's right. In the chat, I just put a link on my website. It has a whole bunch of job seeker presentations I've done. They're all about 1 to 2 hours in length. One of them on that list says it's titled Interviews That Land the Offer. And there's the video, and then right underneath that is the slide deck. Encourage you to watch it, right? And it's got these and other tips that Vern and I are sharing today. So feel free to avail yourself of that. Okay, good conversation about interviewing. All right. So thank you, Enid May, for kicking us off with that. Who else has a good question?
Hey everyone, I'm Ida. So I'll give my 1 minute speech here. So I'm a Virginia native, and I graduated BC's dental school over a decade ago.
Did you say dental school?
Yeah. So over about a decade ago, and I'll say maybe 6 or 7 years into private practice, I did try to pivot out. I was looking into either academic roles, and in healthcare, direct patient care is great, but I was looking for something more fulfilling and just a position, a little bit more stable hours and more impactful. So you're either looking at the insurance aspect or a healthcare organization, or you're looking at academics. So really these are the 3 areas. And it was advised, because there is a little bit of a stigma around dentists, versus an MD. Well, it's the mouth and that's all you can do. So we all kind of got that 10-year itch and went back to school. And the dean of VCU, I said, I don't want to pivot. I don't want to go out of, healthcare. I want to, just build on the studies that I've been doing and my current skills. So I went back to school, and I just finished my degree in health service administration in December. And I totally appreciate what you guys are saying about the interviews. But I only had a couple interviews last year. So I thought, okay, maybe if I finish the program, that'll, help, get a few more. But I'm just really struggling actually getting my foot in the door to just any organization. And, I'm applying to all types of roles. I definitely really hone in onto the responsibilities and the job description and, what they require, education and everything. So, and in my opinion, I'm like, okay, this is in my wheelhouse. I can do this. So I don't know. And I've really, I've gotten a lot of feedback here and there on my resume. So I don't know if it's, I know they talk a lot about the applicant tracking system and you have to have certain keywords. But, sometimes I get responses and sometimes it's just, those automatic, thanks for your interest and we've moved on kind of thing. I know some people say, well, LinkedIn, not great because sometimes they, may fill the position in other locations. So maybe you should branch out to like Indeed or other things. I don't know too many recruiters in the healthcare space or firms. So I have tried to reach out on LinkedIn, but I'm kind of I feel like I've just hit a wall because I don't know what else I can do with my resume and just to kind of, I'm just trying to get in somewhere for, get interviews so that I can, as you put, make those thoughtful decisions about, what's a right fit for me.
So Ida, you have brought up some wonderful, rich topics. Each one of those is a fire hose response. Honestly, we could spend the next hour talking about that. I'll go ahead and try to just quickly, hit some of these things. Obviously, Vern, please, feel free to chime in. I'm actually going to address your last point first around sort of the application channels. Okay. So before we get to the whole, okay, keywords, which yes, that's part of my response. But before we even get there, I want to just take this to a higher level conversation around how should you be applying for jobs? How should you be networking? So please understand, and this is pretty much across the board. And by the way, and that this would not be the case for you, Ida, because you have to be on site to do your job. But I'm talking, whenever I respond, I'm responding to everybody, right? So particularly for those jobs that are fully remote, but even otherwise, there is tremendous competition for jobs. Okay, tremendous competition. For remote jobs, it's like 10x the competition that what it is locally, because the employer can go source candidates all over the country. So you're literally competing with just about everybody. But even so, even if it's local. And so what happens is if an employer posts the job on a job board, whether it's LinkedIn, Indeed, Career Builder, a trade publication, whatever, those are the places where they are looking for the mass pool of candidates. That means your competition is going to be the mass pool of candidates. This is the reason why it is so incredibly important to network. Over 80, historically, and when I say historically, I mean the last 40, 50 years, I mean really like historically, over 80% of people get their jobs through personal networking, not through any sort of, mass marketed job. Over 80% of jobs are hidden from the market, and the two statistics correlate. When I say hidden from the market, I mean these are employers who are using their personal networks, professional networks to source candidates, not going through the job search. In fact, I myself am doing that right now with this vice president search that I just mentioned. Now I'm going on LinkedIn. I didn't post a job on the LinkedIn's job board. I went to the LinkedIn search bar, and which most of us recruiters do, went and source candidates. And I type in the search bar. I'm telling you this because you can do this yourself. Okay. You can be your own recruiter. And the search bar, I typed in vice president government affairs or director government affairs or government relations, what have you. And all these people came up that I had then started reaching out to. Hey, I've got an opportunity. And sure enough, I've got this beautiful candidate pool right now of people who are very refined and targeted because they came from my LinkedIn database, if you will. Okay. You can do the same thing. And one of the things that you want to do is network. And watch, this is going to sound funny, but it'll make sense. You want to network with people who do exactly what you do. People who do exactly what you do. And the reason is those are the people who are going to hear about opportunities that are not right for them, but could be right for you. Why is that important? Because we recruiters are counting on that. When I went out to this vice president of government relations search and started looking for the people, I said, here's the opportunity. Oh, and by the way, feel free to forward to other people in your network who you think, and guess what? People have been doing that because the assumption is birds of a feather. I assume that government relations people know other government relations, and they do. And people at their level. And they've been happy to refer, blah, blah. In fact, one guy referred his boss. And so I say that because that is one of the best ways for you to get your foot in the door. Absolutely, you could be we're networking with the one level up, the people who would be potentially your hiring manager for sure. But either which way, those people need to know you exist so that when that hidden position comes open, they can be saying, call Ida. Now, if you do apply to a job on a job board where there's no law against that, of course you can apply. Just understand that the chances of you getting that job are very, very small, like 10% or less. But if you do choose to apply, that's fine. Even so, you need to find what we call an internal champion. An internal champion is someone who can get your resume noticed. So amongst the masses of hundreds of candidates that they have received, you want your resume to come up to the top of the pile. How does that happen? Well, hopefully you have some sort of connection to that company. So you take the name, I'm sure some of you have done this already, you take the name of the organization, you pop it into LinkedIn search bar, you see all the people who work there. You first try to go for people who are closest to that job. So the hiring manager, the HR person, the recruiter, even the CEO. Those are the kind of the people who are going to be your best bet. If any of those people are second, well, hopefully the first level connection would be lovely, but normally it's not. If you can find a second level connection, that means you have at least one mutual connection. You can reach out to that mutual connection and say, hey, mutual connection, we'll call that person John. Hey, John, I just recently applied for ABC organization and Julie is the hiring manager for that role. I see that you're connected to Julie. Would you consider brokering an introduction, or would you consider forwarding my resume and cover letter to Julie for extra consideration? That's the phrase you want to use, for extra consideration. That means that you're asking for your resume to be pulled to the top of the pile. That's what we call getting an internal champion. And that's just one of the techniques. And I don't want to, I know you had asked other questions too. I'm going to press pause there and see, Fern, did you want to share some thoughts on that?
Well, I'll say the last 3 jobs in my career came from the hidden job market. I was not even looking for a job. And people in my network called me and said, Vern, there's an opportunity here. I think it'd be great for you. Are you interested? And sometimes I was, sometimes I wasn't. But I just want to verify that that hidden job market is out there. And then secondly, as Shira talked about networking, that's really where, while I still do career coaching, my focus is helping people learn to build their networks. So as an example, I'll put my email in the chat. Send me your resume. Shira, I don't know if you remember Tom Weimer at all?
I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Tom is now a very senior person at a benefits consulting firm. So I don't know whether they have any openings or not, but it'll be a way for me to reach out. Hey, Tom, how you doing? How have you been? And Tom and I will have some kind of conversation. And I can say, well, I've got a resume here. Don't know whether you have any openings. He may not. That might be the end of the story. But you don't know
Never
that.
know.
You never know where the opportunity might come from.
That's right.
So
Network. And before you go, Ida, I know you had your hand raised. Did we answer your question? Is that why you lowered it?
Yeah, that was my question. So like you mentioned remote, and that is a very good point. I actually did what you said. So for example, health engagement consultant, Cigna and Booz Allen, and I was like, who do I know? There aren't too many that are within that role, but I went like, okay, who might be hiring? But I was like, maybe it's what am I saying to them that, because I know they probably at some point will get the message, but what you said saying, oh, for extra consideration, that's a better way of saying like, hey, here's my resume, take a look.
Right. And you're not, and by the way, you're not even asking them for a recommendation. There is a difference. If you know the person knows you, they know your work, you can say, hey, would you recommend me for the role? But if you don't, if you're just a sort of a casual acquaintance, or maybe you don't know them very well, you can simply say, can you forward my resume for extra consideration?
Actually, that makes sense. Yeah, because you're right. If it says remote and it's over 100 applicants, then you're like, okay, how's that going to get it?
Exactly. Just to give them a little nudge.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Sure. Maureen? Oh, you're on mute.
Great, thank you. And thanks for everyone's questions. I'm lots of things are being reinforced and built upon. So that's really great. And I appreciate you and Vern being here today. So I on the note of networking and leveraging our network. So I have a network of a little over 1,700 people. A lot are students I've helped over the years. I worked I worked in the business school at Temple. So I have a lot of students I've worked with over the years and advised and coached and mentored in many ways, plus other industry people. So a lot of people actually really know me. Do you recommend kind of like LinkedIn will often, if I make a change to my, if I make a change to something in my profile, it'll say, hey, do you want to send a message and, an announcement to your network? Do you recommend doing that? Like, I know the importance of networking specifically around specific jobs and companies, but do you recommend that kind of blanket kind of statement on LinkedIn?
Saying, hey, everybody, I'm looking for a whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've changed my tune on that in the positive direction. I'll tell you why. So it
Okay.
used to be, you'd think, well, you don't want to sound desperate, or LinkedIn isn't really for that purpose. LinkedIn changes. LinkedIn has changed in terms of how personal people are getting. Not that that's so personal, it's professional, but even so, I have noticed when people tend to do that, you have to do it in a professional way, right?
Right.
I have noticed the comments like, oh, Maureen, didn't realize oh, hey, you should call this one, or oh, blah, blah, blah. People want to be helpful, and they can't be helpful unless they know that you need some help.
Right.
So now I'm not saying do that all the time, but you may want to consider doing it and being very specific and saying this now, not a huge thing, but specifically what you're looking for, the kinds of organizations you're looking to be introduced to, the kind of role that you're seeking, kind of introductions you're just looking for, and then see who responds. You may also want to be thoughtful around when you post it. I actually might even think doing it like on a Saturday morning, because a lot of people are like, yeah, they're just scrolling through LinkedIn on Saturday, they're not doing it, at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday because they're working, right? And they'll blow right by them.
I would do that when I was looking for people to help out. I would try to target certain times when I thought they might look at their personal
That's
email, right? Because a lot of times LinkedIn goes to your personal email.
That usually, actually, most people have it to the personal email. Yeah,
that's true. That makes sense, right?
Yeah. So that's one thing.
Okay.
The other thing I would add there, Maureen, and this is really for everybody, the couple of things. The foundational principle for contacts count is networking and building relationships is not about talking and taking. It's about teaching and giving. And the logic is pretty simple. The more you teach other people about who you are, what you're about, what your aspirations are, what your challenges are, the more you teach somebody about who you are, the greater likelihood they might help you in some way, now or in the future. And likewise, it can't be a one-way street. So you've got to learn those same things about them, and so that you can give back and help them whenever it's possible. Now you've got 1,700 people. And the other point I'd make is, what's the strength of your relationship with those 1,700 people? How many of them do you really know really, really well?
That's right.
You
Honestly, a
don't.
lot of them. I've advised over 1,000 MBA students. Most of them are those students.
Okay.
And a good percentage of them, know me pretty
they
well
will,
and are grateful to
and they'll
how I've
remember
helped
you
them.
then.
Yeah.
All the more reason to do what you're saying then, because the likelihood that you're going to get a better response is pretty high. And what in the contacts count world, we call those dormant relationships.
Yeah.
Those are relationships that you had. They were really close. You knew them well. You advised them. You knew their personalities. You knew probably something about their family. You knew a lot of stuff about them, but you haven't talked to them in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. But they will remember you based on the strength of that previous relationship. So, that's a great resource for you, Maureen.
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard people remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And I always took time for these people. So I'm like, all
Mhm.
right, this is an opportunity and I don't want to squander it, which is why I'm asking the question. I don't want to like send this blanket and then later, reaching out. I don't know.
So
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
want to
give
make sure I leverage this network
some,
like
I'm gonna give you
well.
a super practical tip. So first of all, yes, go ahead and do the mass email because you never know who's gonna see that, or the mass thing. But I want to give
Yeah.
you a super practical tip that actually just worked for me. And Vern, this is a new thing, meaning I haven't shared this on this call before because it's literally hot off the press. And
Okay.
I not only did this successfully for myself, not realizing that it was going to be so successful, but I've now encouraged a couple of my clients to do that and starting to work. And so here's what it is. So it's actually very much along the lines of what you just talked about, Maureen, in terms of those connections and what Vern said about dormant connections. So here goes. Ready? Okay. So you want to get on LinkedIn and you're going to go to your My Network tab. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull it up myself. So I'm going to show you very practically. I mean, this is like ridiculously practical. Okay. So I'm going to pull up LinkedIn, show you what I'm talking about. So you're going to go here to the My Network tab right there.
Mhm.
Step 1. Step 2, I'm going to click on connections. And then you're going to go over here where it says search with filters. Search with filters. Now, right here, you've got different options as to how you can use filters. So I'm going to give you lots of different things, but first I'm going to teach you what you're looking for here. So because these are your first level connections. You want to first of all think about who are the people who you want to network with. Who are the people who can benefit from networking with you? Okay, so this isn't everybody. This is going to be a select group of people. So first you have to figure out who those people are. So maybe Maureen, it's going to be your former students. Maybe it's going to be other folks in education executives, whatever you decide. So here's how you're going to do this. Number one, you're going to go into the search bar and you're going to say, I'm just saying it, education. So maybe I'm putting in education because I'm presumed, or I'll be more specific. I'll say Vice President Education. Enid May, you would appreciate this search as well. Okay, I'm going to say Vice President Education. All right. What that did was it just filtered down from my 29,000 contacts to 696 people. You see, these are all people, VP Education, membership in education, right? They're all my first levels. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, to mind you, this is a lot of people, but I'm going to go through this list and I'm going to say, who on this list do I actually have a relationship with? It could have been 5, 10, 15 years ago, but who do I have somebody who currently I'm interested or in the past thought fondly of me. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to say, oh, here, Divya. Okay. So Divya is someone I haven't talked to in a minute, half a minute. And I'm going to go like this. I'm going to message her. Okay. And I'm going to say, in fact, I'm going to actually bring up a real one. Like this is the thing that I did recently. I'm going to bring up one. And I'm going to bring up, in fact, it was just yesterday that I had my networking call with her. All right. So here's what I said. Now I did this at the beginning of the year. This is it. All right. Hi, Yvonne. Happy New Year. It's been some time since we connected in person, so I wanted to invite you for a Zoom catch-up call to hear what's keeping you up these days and how I can be supportive. Okay, if I toss out some dates, let me know if there are any days I should avoid the next few weeks. Look forward to catching up. I sent this note out to a whole bunch of people over the holidays, right after the holidays. Can I tell you all how beautifully this worked? I have been busier than a one-arm paper hanger in the last month of all of the Zoom catch-up calls that I've been having, including with her that I did just last night. Okay. People have, because these are people who know me. And so it was like, she's like, hey, hi, Jer, love to catch up, blah, 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 right? So what did I do? I created, this is again, super practical. I created a doodle poll. I created a one-to-one doodle poll. And in that doodle poll, I put down a whole bunch of times. Now for me, because these were really just networking, I didn't want to put them in the middle of my day. So to ease scheduling, I created a doodle with early AM/COB slots. That was just how I chose to do it. For you guys, I would recommend that you do it maybe a little tighter because you're trying to network pretty quickly. So you can have slots that, let's say, over the next 3 weeks, and you have different times of day, maybe some early morning for folks, some COB, maybe a lunchtime slot in here, maybe 15 options, something like that, 20 options. You don't want to give them too many. If that person had a relationship with you, and if they see their LinkedIn, now they may not see their LinkedIn message, okay? But if they see their LinkedIn, bless you, if they see their LinkedIn message, bless you, Bern, if they see their LinkedIn message, chances are they're going to say yes, because they're like, oh, Maureen, blast from the past, would love to catch up. And you just made it easy for them by providing them a scheduling tool that they can just pick a time, okay? Now, I will tell you, when you do that, when you do the doodle, I'm getting technical here, okay? When you do that doodle, there's going to be a location section on that doodle. Like it'll have you'll say the name of the meeting, and you'll say catch up with Maureen Cannon, and then it'll say location. And I just put in Zoom, but I believe you could actually put in your Zoom link. If you don't put in your Zoom link, you just say Zoom, then what'll happen is when they click on the date, they want to meet you on March 5th, all right? It'll automatically send a calendar invitation to them and to you. It'll go on automatically on both of your calendars. You want to go back to the calendar invite that just showed up in your inbox, and you want to repopulate it with the actual Zoom link. If that Zoom link doesn't show up, you got to repopulate it. Right. And the other thing too is when you write them back and they say, oh, great, yes, I've just, scheduled with you, exchange cell phones. I mean, I'm getting really practical here. These are little technical tips that I've learned over the time. Give them your cell and say, hey, just in case you need to reach me that morning or whatever, here's my cell. May I have yours as well? Because you know how it happens with Zoom glitches, right, Maureen? You had that this morning. You couldn't reach us. Stuff happens, or they're running late or anything like that. These are little tiny things that can make such a big difference. You can even double confirm with them if you want the day before, just to make sure that they're going to show up. But the point here is that you reach out to people who you've had a relationship with, who will want to hear from you. Hopefully they say yes. You give them a practical scheduling tool, 30-minute call. What do you do in that call? This is the second thing, okay? In that call, here's what you don't do. This is going to be very natural. People are going to say, oh, Maureen, it's been so long. Maureen, how are you doing? What's going on in your world? Here's what you don't do. Don't answer that question yet. Don't answer that question yet. You say, oh, Susie, I'm so glad to catch up with you. I would love to share more about you. First, I want to hear more about you. And you flip the tables to Susie. You find out how she's doing, what's going on in her world. And then you see if you can be helpful to her in any way. It could be personally, it could be professionally. Maybe you have someone in your network you can refer to her, connect her, a resource, an article, I don't know, anything, something. She talks about what's going on with her. So you be relational, be genuine about that. Then when she flips the table back to you, you want to be able to share what's going on. And as Fern talks about, teaching and giving. Okay, so you're going to give her some stuff, but you're also going to teach her about who you are and what's going on with you. And you want to be targeted in how you address her, because look, all the people that you talk to are in different places in their life, different places in their professional understanding of what you do. Some people are going to understand your jargon. So like Vern and I, right? So Vern and I we talk about the story here that he and I met at an HR organization. By the way, Vern, as we speak, this hot second, my husband Eliyahu is at an HRLF meeting. And then there are people that are like, where's Shira? And I haven't been in so long. I'm like, I'll come in April. Anyway, so Vern and I met at this thing called HRLF, the HR Leadership Forum, years ago. And that's a group of HR leaders, okay? If Vern and I, or me and any of the people there were to start talking HR topics, we could talk jargon with each other. We can talk about employee engagement and recruitment and blah, 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 blah. I can't do that with other people because they're not going to understand that. Why would they? Maureen and Enid, you guys can talk education to each other all day long, right? But somebody else might not understand that. The point is, be thoughtful in how you're messaging your story to the other person. Will the other person understand what you're talking about or not? And if they don't, you have to be very sensitive and respectful of that and speak in a way that they can understand, right? Not get too in the weeds with them. It might be, in fact, I've done this before where, let's say I'm talking to somebody. So one of my communities is the association community. So in fact, that's actually how Enid May and I know each other, through that community. So Enid May and I can go talk association, talking blah, 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 right? But if Enid May was not in that community and I was trying to network with her and trying to say, hey, I'm looking for connections there, all I would do is first I'd say, are you familiar with the association sector? They may or may not be, in which case I might have to define it. And if they are, but they're merely not in the community, as far as I'm concerned, I can just say to Enid May, hey, look, if you meet anyone in the association community who has this kind of need, feel free to pass them my way. But I'm not going to go into detail with her about all that that means because she's not going to understand it, right? But she might understand at a high level, this is what the sector is. So be very thoughtful. So Ida, when you're talking to folks in the healthcare world, do they understand the dentistry world? Do they not? Okay. Are they going to understand when you talk about shifting careers into a hospital setting or into an NGO or into whatever? Will they understand? Message to them. And if they don't, be sensitive to that and speak in a way that they can understand. Does that make sense? So be really, really thoughtful. But again, first talk about them, see how you can be helpful. Then when it comes to you, you can be sharing more of your story. Vern, I know this is very much in your world. So do you want to add to this?
Yeah. No, I don't think I can add much there. That everything Shira said is basically what we try to teach people at Contacts Count. You know, these are basic behaviors, basic skills that if you use these, they're more likely to help you build what we refer to long-term as a trust-based, mutually beneficial relationship.
That's right.
And when you have that type of relationship with anyone, you know that if that person needs help in some way, you will give it to them without even a second thought, and vice versa. If you need something from them, they will do the same thing. Shira and I yesterday, Shira reached out to me,
Yes.
said I'm working with a client,
Yeah.
was looking to work with virtual assistants. Vern, I know you worked with a company and you hired a virtual assistant. And she said, could you connect my client to the person who ran that, company? The person that ran that company or did the recruiting for VAs, she and I developed a strong relationship over 3 or 4 months. And she's just been one of those people that's willing to give. So that Julie and Jennifer are already email introduction, and they're going to set up a time to
And can
talk.
I go take it even one more step to add a little color to what actually happened? I was actually having lunch with my client named Julie. We're sitting there at the Fairview Park Marriott, okay? And we're talking about that she has this challenge around she needs a virtual assistant. And I was like, oh, wait a second. I remember Vern told me he's got this contact. I couldn't remember her name. I literally picked up the phone. I called him right there in the lunch. I'm like, Vern, can you help me? And he goes, yes. And I mean, within minutes, right? And he calls Jennifer and da 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 da. And then we have this email exchange. And now my client, Julie, is connecting with Jennifer to see if she can be helpful, right?
Yeah.
But that's the power of a trusted relationship and a trusted network, but also wanting to be a giver, right? Vern and I just want to help. We just want to help people. And we're trying to make wonderful connections between people, but you've got to be thinking about the other people in your network in order to make those connections, right? Yeah, this is all very, very important. I'm hoping this is helpful for you guys.
Yeah.
All right, Tanji, we have not heard from you. Do you have questions for us?
We probably have to schedule another whole session.
Okay.
But anyway,
The next 3 minutes.
right, this has been very helpful.
Well, we will have another call in a couple of weeks. So
Right.
Yeah.
But first thing is I'm Tangi Newborn, and I've had I have over 30 years of association and nonprofit management experience. Enid May and I are very good friends and colleagues, and been working together for years in different areas. And I'm finding myself, after working for a nonprofit for 10 years, I'm back in the job market because they did a reorg. And I feel, and it may just be me, I feel that my resume, as people look at it, are like, she's about to retire, or she's going to want to retire. So I actually want to work for the next 10 years before I retire, because I'll be 64 in April. I don't mind telling people that, because sometimes that's what you need to tell and get the help. but I do want to continue to work for at least 8 to 10 more years. And, but I don't want to. So I've been an executive director, CEO, all that kind of stuff. The last gig I had, I was an operations director. So I was starting to come down out of that executive mode because I didn't want to be responsible, is what I say, for the toilets to flush and the water to run.
Right.
But I moved into operations, so I still was responsible for the toilets to flush and the water to run.
Right.
So I guess my question, and if we can't answer it now, and if you could keep it in mind for the next segment, is how do you get around this
Age
she's
thing.
she's getting old syndrome, and should we really hire her? Or
here's the first thing. It's like the most classic clean answer that we could ever give you. The first one is, do not put all 30 years on your resume. Okay. So the first thing is you cut it off at a certain year. I usually recommend about 20 years to cut it off at. And so, and now that may be an artificial number for you, depending upon where 20 years hits your, your experience. But the bottom line is that you just don't mention it, because there's no need. There's no reason. When I worked at Swenson's ice cream at 16 years old, that's not going on my resume, right? It's just because you work there doesn't mean that's going on your resume. So, that's the very first thing, but it's more than that, right? Because as much as age discrimination, unfortunately, does exist, what it more comes down to for certain people is the level of experience that you have and the kind of job that you're going for. Now, you happen to be a senior level person. And so if anything, what I like to say is that employers usually are more open to the gray hair when you are in a senior level role, because they want experience. I mean, they're not going to hire somebody probably 27 to be the VP of operations. Okay. So that's fine. It's when you're going after the lower level roles and you're competing with people who are more early in their career, that's where sometimes that misunderstanding can happen, to say, oh, you're overqualified. That's the phrase, right, that people will use because they're thinking that you're going to be bored in the job. That's usually what's going on. There's some other biases there, but I would say it's not necessarily the when are you going to retire? Yes, some people do think that. But again, if you cut it off at 20 years, that's already going to be limiting the bias, the natural bias that people might have. But I would also say that the energy with which you put forward, right? When you're in that interview, if you are full in it, you are aligned with their mission, you are embracing this role, you've got great ideas, you're innovative, you are like, I'm in this to win this. That's more likely going to draw you to them, because at the end of the day, age doesn't matter. It really doesn't. I mean, I've had people all kinds of ages get all kinds of jobs. And in fact, I placed somebody a couple of years ago that was a pretty senior person, and it showed. But man, the employer was completely open. In fact, I talked to her the other day. She was one of those networking calls. She was like, "Oh my gosh, we love Martin. He's the best thing that ever happened to us." There are people who are very, very open. So don't want to have that in your mind. You want to have in your mind, I am ready to continue to, make a contribution, and I've got energy, and I've got enthusiasm, and I've got innovative ideas, and I really want to contribute. So a lot of it has to do with your approach and your mentality in terms of how they perceive you. I don't think it's going to be as much of an issue as you think.
Well, I think, I guess too, when you say cut it off for 20 years, that's going to be a detriment to me, because I've stayed everywhere 8 to 10 years. So that would literally limit me to like maybe 2 jobs. And the bulk of the experience is probably about 3 to 4 jobs.
So it depends on how important that is to your branding, because it may not be that important, even if you only have the 2 jobs. By the way, a lot of people like good tenure, so that's not a bad thing. So even if you only had the 2 jobs on your resume, in fact, somebody I just interviewed yesterday has one employer. He's literally been with that one employer since 1990 something or another. And he's just had, progression. I'm not worried about that too much. You can have the 2 jobs. However, if the jobs prior to that are extremely relevant to your brand, what you can do is you can have a little section called prior experience, the bottom of your resume. And all it says there is organization title, no dates, not even a description, just organization title, and that's it. So it shows you have a little more experience. It implies that the brand is there because you want those titles there, or you could do a little job description if you wanted to, but don't make a big deal of them. just sort of, it's almost like a footnote. And that can absolutely cover it. Right. But if you put all the 30 years, then they're going to know more or less, you know.
The one other thing that can help you, well, there's probably more things, but the one that comes to mind, and this is from personal experience, we talked about having a champion before. And so in those types of situations where the ageism is, you know, potentially an issue, or it is an issue, if you have someone who is, you know, close to the hiring manager, close to the CEO, who's saying, you really should hire this person because I know of her capabilities and you'd be a fool not to hire her, whatever, that obviously can help overcome that. And in my last position, the senior executives asked the recruiter, well, if we hire Vern, how long do you think he's going to stay around? Because I was about your age at the time, okay?
Thanks, Vern. I really appreciate
okay.
it. No, seriously.
All right, so it's real.
Like,
now, here's what happened. Here's what happened. The recruiter happened to be a former boss of mine for 10 years, from 10 years ago. So she was able to say, she said, I don't know how long he's going to hang around, but let me tell you what Vern accomplished when he worked for me. And of course, when she called me and she said, well, you're one of the 2 finalists, what do you think? You know, and she shared this with me. I said, Angela, I would never take a job and be there for a year or 2 and leave. That wouldn't be unethical to me. I said, I'm looking, if I accept this job, it's 5 years. I'll stay there 5 years because I know I can make a contribution and so forth. And so I know it's real out there, and it's the most frustrating thing when you're, you know, unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about our age.
But at the same time, things are changing a little bit. I mean, not to be glib, but, you know, 65 is the new 45, right? So there's so many people who are working way past traditional retirement age, and traditional retirement age is only that because that only started in the 1920s and 30s. I don't know if you all know that, because of Social Security, and it was an actuarial number, and most people didn't live beyond 65. Things are changing, okay? Lots and lots and lots of people are living way, 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 way longer than that and are working way, way longer than that. And so I'm starting to see a little bit of a pendulum shift toward people being more open and not just, you know, assuming.
Yeah. I was hoping that it would benefit, since so many people complain about the Gen Zs and the millennials who don't even want to stay beyond 6 months sometimes. Like, hey, here's somebody that stays 8 years.
You bring some longevity for sure.
Yeah. I did want to add one little quick thing for Ida, because I used to work for a women's medical association back in the day. But I was going to say too, when you're in your job search, consider looking for some specifics like that, where it's an association that has maybe a job board themselves, where they post jobs for other organizations, where they're specifically looking for gender, or even sometimes they don't say it, but I do know, because I was head of membership back then, that they would post because they were trying to quote unquote fill the gender gap, but they couldn't come out and say, oh, we're looking to hire a woman. But they would post the job on the women's association and hope to get the women candidates. And sometimes that can put you in a closer proximity than just going out on LinkedIn or going out, you know, on Indeed. But to look for those specific associations that target women in your industry, or even like I worked for the National Association of Black Journalists. They did the same thing. They were looking for actually African-American journalists, but they couldn't come out and say it. So people could post on that website, you know, WBAL or somebody would post on that website, because that's the gap they were trying to fill for their DEI initiative. It's sad, but that's what they did.
That's a good tip, yeah.
So it could help you in that area too.
Appreciate it.
Hey guys, real quickly, I remembered that there was another tip I wanted, and I'm going to pivot. So, but Tanji, thank you for your good question. I want to pivot back to the networking thing. There was this one other little tip I wanted to mention. So let's say you've had this great networking call, you've been giving and teaching and all these things. At the end of the call, what do you do? How do you sign off? You want to continue to expand your network. You want to continue to invite those folks to help you connect with other people in their network. How do you do that? Okay. A really great sort of wrap up kind of ask is to ask them, who else, you're asking your person, right? Who else do you know that could benefit from speaking with me? Who else do you know? Now, notice I did not say, do you know anyone? Do you know anyone is a closed-ended question. Who do you know forces them to think about their network? Who do you know that could benefit from speaking with me next? Okay. That hopefully will get them to think, oh, well, you know, these two people. Then what do you do with that? You can't just reach out. So there are different ways you can do this. You can say, hey, thank you so much for that. Would you like to provide their email addresses? I'm happy to reach out to them and copy you on the email. That's going to save them time. Or would you like to broker the introduction for me? If they say they would prefer to do that, that means they have to get off the call and remember to do that, and they're on to the next thing. So what you can do then is say, hey, if you would like to do the introduction, that's great. So John, what I'm going to do is Enid May, right? I'm going to email you a tickler. Is that okay? Inbox ticklers are a really good thing. And you're going to follow up and say, hi, John, it was great catching up with you. Thanks so much for agreeing to introduce me to Susie Cream Cheese. Just as a reminder, this is the kind of work I'm looking for. Here's my resume. Here's my LinkedIn profile. Thanks for brokering the introduction. So it's going to be in his inbox, and all he has to do is forward it and not forget about you. Because he'll be very well intended, but then he's going to get very busy. Okay. Just want to throw that in there. Okay. So hope this was helpful today. You're all welcome back. We are meeting these days every other Friday. So not first and third, but every other Friday. So just keep track of that on your calendars. And hopefully Alki will be joining us next time. He's also a wonderful resource. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up the formal part of this call. But if any of you would like to stay on with me for I'm going to be leading a short prayer call right after this. If you'd like to join me for that, you're certainly welcome. Okay. So I wish everybody a blessed day, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.